Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Donlin. I am the Associate Executive Director for Learn, and I'm thrilled on behalf of our panelists this evening to join you to our very first ever Learn Family University session. We do have two sessions tonight divided by age group, so we're very excited to get to speak with you this evening. Just as a little background, tonight's session is the first of what we hope to be many sessions on a variety of topics. Tonight is a broad overview of strategies and tools to help your child be successful in online learning. And as we move forward throughout the year, we hope to offer more topics that will be most helpful to you. Tonight is a result of your feedback. Starting last spring, we held many town hall meetings and individual conversations to say, how are things going for you as a parent, as a person, and for your children as learners? Some of what we heard was the need for more synchronous live time in our instruction. We heard we needed to strengthen our sense of community between teachers and students with each other. We heard we needed to focus on some of our priority learning during instruction, reduce the number of platforms we have for our technology, and to bring in an online learning expert, which we did with Ms. Santerre, who you'll hear from this evening. Another piece of feedback we heard was to build additional supports for our families, such as this evening, to provide some additional tools and supports to help us all as we navigate this new approach to learning. Finally, we also heard we needed to do more to support our families in multiple languages. And as Sue mentioned a little earlier, we're so grateful and pleased to have translators here tonight in Mandarin, Haitian Creole, and in Spanish, three of our primary languages within our schools. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. In terms of introductions, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to our main panelists this evening. First up, we have Dr. Sue Iwaniki, who is our Director of Curriculum and Instruction here at Learn. We also have Pamela Santerre, who is our Coordinator of Online Learning. And we also have Carla Strecker, who is one of our Special Education Supervisors at Learn. So tonight we're gonna go back and forth and share some information with you. As we go to the next slide, we wanted to model for you some of what you may see if you're kind of peeking over your kid's shoulder in terms of their online learning time. Oftentimes at the very beginning of a Zoom or Google Meets, you'll see teachers setting some expectations for the class. What you see on the screen tonight are some common expectations that teachers have in their classes around being prepared, participating, muting when not speaking, chatting responsibly, and participating fully. This evening's presentation is more of a webinar style, so we can't see you through your cameras right now and everyone is on mute. What we'd like to encourage you to do throughout the presentation is if you have a question that you'd like us to answer, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom, and I think Pam is going to tell you a little bit more about those options now.
Hi, everyone. So at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see 4 different icons. It's right below where you can see our faces as well as the presentation for this evening. All the way to the left is the chat feature. That's a place that we will be asking you periodically to interact with us and each other. You will also see a raised hand feature at different points during the presentation this evening. We may ask you to speak if we have enough time at the end. So you'll raise your hand just like in class, and then we would allow you the permission or pass you the mic. You will see a Q&A feature right next to that. That is a way for you to ask us questions. We're such a large group this evening, so that it'll be a way for us to make sure that none of your questions are missed, and we can go back to those and answer those during our question and answer time this evening. And then finally, as Sue said, you will see a small globe which will allow you to switch channels so that you can take advantage of the services of our wonderful interpreters this evening. So with that, we'd like to give you time to practice using our chat. So looking at the emojis on the screen, I know my nieces love emojis. So please, in the chat, type the number of the emoji in which you're feeling right now. Thanks, everyone. I see a lot of happies, a lot of just okays, and a lot of worries. And we're definitely understanding all of those feelings. It's been a whirlwind of feelings since March. And we're hoping that tonight is a step towards, if you are feeling worried or just okay, to feeling better about your child in online learning.
We want to thank all of you for sharing how your week is going, and we also want to recognize how families have been navigating through a lot between COVID and the different types of education that your children have been experiencing. We know that it's only through partnership that we can truly teach your child in the best way, and that the two stabilizing forces in your child's life are home and school, and that through partnership we can reach your child and educate your child in a more effective way. We want to encourage you to communicate with your child's teacher as often as possible and allow your child to engage in learning with the teacher during their lessons. There are times where you might want to help your child while they're engaging online learning, but we encourage you to try to let your child engage as much as possible and communicate with the teacher about anything you're noticing about your child's needs. Through partnership, we believe that we can help your child to receive the best education, whether they are in school or in an online environment. We know that distance learning is not going to harm your children unless we don't have that strong partnership. So our goal tonight is to really talk about what are the ways in which we can maintain and further establish partnerships between our families and our schools for the optimal environment of education of your child. So before we go further, we'd like to ask you, what has been the biggest challenge of being both a teacher and a parent since March? There's been times where students have been completely offline and online and in school, or a hybrid model. What has been your biggest challenge since March? Take a moment to just respond in the chat. So thank you very much, Sharice. Having 7 meetings plus a full-time job, we've definitely heard that there's a lot of stress in trying to balance the different expectations. Thank you for sharing that kids that tell you that what they would not do with their teachers, things like crying at the slightest difficulty. Definitely scheduling is very tough. Managing dual households with schooling. Yes, there's definitely a lot of keeping the child focused. We're definitely hearing the same types of comments. So we appreciate everything you're doing to try to manage all of those elements at the same time. Thank you for sharing. We want to recognize throughout our presentation today that while we will make several suggestions, we also know that you know your child best. We know that sometimes while we're making a recommendation, it might not be worth the battle that needs to happen in your own house at that particular moment, but we want to still allow you to hear some of the resources that we are hearing have been working for children and families, and make sure that we let you know, because we know that your child wants to learn. Most of our kids want to learn, and through working together, hopefully we can give some new resources to attain that learning. Obviously, no one had a crystal ball to foresee what this year would look like. And we don't know what will happen next, but we do know there will probably be a continued element of distance learning. So one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about today is, what does the research say about distance learning? In a study by Fisher, Frey, and Hattie from 2020, which has been repeated over years, what it's found is that the effects of distance learning are not negative, but they're low when you look at distance learning solely by itself. So just the students being online does not have a high effect in terms of learning. But when you combine their learning with teacher-student relationships, interactive videos, deliberate practice, using all the strategies we know to be good teaching and instruction, then you have a high effect rate or more students that are able to learn. We also notice in the same research that the presence of mobile phones actually has a negative effect. So one of the things that we wanted to suggest is, if you do have a cell phone that your child has access to in addition to their tablet or their computer, it's probably a good idea, and that's our first tip of the night, to make sure that you don't let them have access during their instructional time. I see in our chat that there's a question about what is deliberate practice. So deliberate practice would be when the teacher allows opportunity for a child to reinforce or practice a new skill that they've been introduced so that they can retain it over time. So some of that research looks at reviewing a new skill or strategy within 24 hours has a higher chance of them remembering it than if they wait, say, 48 hours or 2 days. But giving them an opportunity to really repeat or reflect, or if they're working on a skill, trying it again, helps to reinforce that new skill. So again, that was our first tip, is when your child is engaged in learning tasks, we want to make sure that phones are off and not distracting from learning. I'm sure that many of you have some devices in class that you've been able to, in your homes, that you've been able to remove from the environment. And I just want to thank you for that. I see many parents doing, so much work, and not just all the other things you mentioned, but in making sure that the environment is a good one for their child to focus. So thank you for that. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to Ms. Carla Straker, who's going to tell you a little bit more about back to school basics.
Welcome, everyone. I'm going to apologize right away because I have a feeling that my dog is going to bark in about 1 second. And I think that all of our individuals who have joined us this evening can understand those distractions. Amazon just made a delivery to my house. So hopefully we can move along without too much noise. So I'm going to ask our Pam to move along on our slide, and I'm going to introduce our second tip. And our second tip revolves around establishing routines. We know that school in the traditional sense provides a lot of routine for our children. There's a certain established beginning time, there is an established ending time, lunch is established at a certain time. And one of the things that you can do to support your child at home is to maintain routines at home. I think about, with my own family, the difference between what summer vacation looks like, as well as what what the school year looks like. Our routines tend to diminish and we fall apart a little bit. So by establishing routines, you're going to provide consistency to your learner. And in our slide presentation here, we're going to show you a few different examples of younger learner schedules that can be provided. This here schedule includes a clock, as well as some icons that could support our early learners, our early readers, that match up times with the day with a certain activity. So you'll see it at 8 a.m. and this model schedule. Breakfast is an opportunity. If you see a little bit later in the day, lunch is provided at noontime. So by maintaining those routines, we're teaching learning skills, we're teaching time management skills, and we're teaching an awareness of routine, schedule, etc. The second schedule is a visual schedule. It doesn't match up times with the learner's schedule, but it does provide some pictures that can support what a day might look like. So you'll see that this one is formatted more horizontally, with breakfast starting in the upper left-hand corner. And then it has work time offset with some outside time, or maybe some exploratory or specials time worked into the student's schedule. And lastly, we don't want you to forget about your home chores. Chores are really a really nice way to build learning in your child's day. They establish good habits and a sense of responsibility. They're important in our own well-being, our home functioning. They really do teach a lot of skills, and it's okay to provide and assign your child chores during their work day or during their school day. That's an okay thing to do, and it breaks up the screen time as well. So to recap, what we'd like you to do for tip 2 is, identify the self-care needs of your child and develop those routines. Develop a schedule, and if you need it, ask your child to follow those routines. Make sure your child is ready for school every day, and celebrate when your child is following the schedule, and maybe give feedback when your child has skewed away from the schedule. Develop a list of chores that might be helpful or age appropriate for your child. There's lots of resources on the internet about age appropriate chores for different age levels. And avoid negotiating schoolwork versus chores. We don't want to have more, our home school environment is blurred quite a bit at this time with our distance learning format. We don't want to blur the lines by playing one chores versus schoolwork. I'm going to pass this on to our next tip, which is Ms. Santerre. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Our next tip is to think about creating an environment where your child can learn. I know, as Carla was saying, it's really hard right now for us to help our children establish the difference between home and school, because right now they're in the same place. And so what the research is telling us is that the more that you can help your child establish a routine about going to school every day, even if school happens to be your dining room table, that's going to help your child's brain determine when it's time to work versus when it's time to be at home or when it's time to play. So one of the biggest recommendations from all of the experts who are studying home learning right now is that help your child find a place for school. Now we know that it's not possible for every family to have a designated place for each of their children. We know that sometimes families are learning and working all in the same room. But one tip that you can, if you have the opportunity to, is to provide or get headphones for your child that has a headphone and a microphone, so that the child feels like they're in school without having the distraction of everything that's going on behind them. I know that we were just awarded a grant for our Learn Schools, and we're hoping that through your school, we might make some headphones and microphones available for children to have if they need them at home, or if you're unable to provide those for your child. But if in all possibilities, try to minimize distractions whenever possible. Just tonight, you've heard, the sound of a heating element and the sound of a dog. And so we recognize that it's not always easy, and we are by no means experts, but just a little bit of effort can go a long way to helping your child stay focused on what's happening in their virtual classroom. What we do request, or what experts do request, is that try not to have your child's learning space be their bedroom. We all know that there are places and spaces that when we go there, we feel either ready to party or ready to have fun versus ready to sit down and work. And for your child, the routine of going into their bedroom means it's time to sleep or it's time to play. And so that's really difficult to combat. So if at all possible, have your child be in somewhere other than their bedroom. If it's not possible, if the bedroom is their only quiet place, try to set them up somewhere other than their bed. Even if they're sitting on the floor with their back against a wall. Another benefit of that is that the child or the child's student classmates are only seeing the wall. They're not seeing into the rest of your home or into the child's bedroom, which that your child is being broadcast to other people's homes. So we don't want other people seeing your child's bedroom. So in this case of this lovely young child in the bottom left over here, we can see his colorful patterned wall versus this child over here, where you can actually see into a lot of their house, and the people who are in their house may not know that there might be on the child's video. So try to have the child with their back against a wall, so that it's less distracting for the teacher as well as for their classmates. Another way of setting a routine for your child that can help dictate that they're about to go to school is to have a dedicated space for their for their supplies, their books, their notebooks, all of those things that they can pick up and carry to their learning space. Several of my friends are having their children at home full time right now, and they actually keep their school supplies in their backpack. And the kids pick up the backpack from the kitchen table and they walk it into the living room where they go to school. So just that routine of picking up their items and going into a space can actually signal to the child's brain it's time to learn. It also stops the things from happening and from going missing, which can happen in the course of our busy day. And the children actually experience some anxiety if they can't find their materials and they don't feel ready to learn. It actually can distract them from the learning. So if you have everything in one place, they pick it up and they go to school, it makes things a lot easier for the child. So just to recap, try to identify a dedicated space for each child, ideally outside the bedroom. Try to keep that space consistent so that habits form in relationship to that space. Try to keep the supplies needed for learning nearby that space. Help your child develop a plan for when they get up and they take breaks and they get food. And think about establishing some ground rules for others in that space, including how they should act when the child is learning in that space. For example, if the child is learning in the living room, it may not be the best situation for another family member to go in there and watch TV or vacuum when the child is learning. And then ask the child to get up and move from that space when they're ready to eat or exercise or socialize, just to help keep that space dedicated to learning. So in the chat, we'd like you to take a minute to process. You've heard from several of us about some things that you can do to help support your child. What are some of the things that you can do as a parent to help support these basics? What a great suggestion about setting an alarm for your child to help them learn when it's time to log in. Great way of helping them keep themselves on track. I'm hearing some things about headphones. Headphones are a wonderful thing to add if you're not already doing that. Sandra, thank you so much for helping your child with their assignments. I know having our littles at home, especially when they're 3 and 4, can be a full-time job. And Kathy, thanks for doing that as well. I would encourage you to think about doing headphones as well for our little ones, as long as you help them keep the volume down. Thank you everyone for your comments and for all that you're doing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Donlin.
All right, thank you so much. I don't know about everybody on the webinar, but this is a favorite conversation in my household with my kids, and that's monitoring screen time. I feel like this is a conversation I struggle to win at times, but I think part of the reason is there's not a great deal of definitive research on appropriate amounts of screen time for educational purposes, but there's ample research on screen time for recreational purposes. Where do you turn to, and how do you figure out what's the right balance for your child and for your family? Many of the resources we're sharing with you tonight come from a great book called The Distance Learning Playbook for Parents. And so the Distance Learning Playbook for Parents, Sam has there, she's holding it up for you to take a look at. And by the way, we'll have the presentation and some additional resources available for everybody afterwards as well. But a great resource that we're pulling a lot of this from as well. But Pam, if you go to that next slide, what they used to make a suggestion is the American Academy of Pediatrics, who unfortunately don't offer a very clear answer for us, but say that there's no one size fits all approach for children in the ages of 5 to 18. If you ask my daughter, I have a fifth grader and I have a second grader. My fifth grader thinks she's the expert on it, and offer you her opinion. But really what the American Pediatrics say is that you need to make a family media plan. So this is something we do in my house is we sit down and we take a look at how much of the day needs to be on screen for educational purposes. And then what does that mean for recreational purposes? Because my kids do like to use screen time to unwind and to connect with friends, which is something that they struggle to do in person. So part of it is seeking balance. Kind of like a healthy diet is everything in moderation. So there's some good questions on here that come from the playbook that we encourage people to consider when thinking about screen time. Is your child playing outside of the screen time? Does your child have an opportunity to interact with others? Do they engage in other activities such as doing their chores? Do they have that time to talk and connect with family members? Balance at the bottom there is the key to making screen time decisions and to trying to help create a healthy balance for all of our kids. One of the pieces we're also doing with our teachers is really trying to look instructionally about what needs to be done online versus what can come offline. A lot of what we're trying to accomplish with the technology is forming connections across the barrier of physical space. While we can't be together personally, we can try to create those opportunities to connect through synchronous opportunities. We don't want to lose that. However, there's lots of ways to turn instructional time to non-screen time, even in this hybrid environment, where kids can go off away from the computer to complete activities, can go off into nature outside to complete an exploration. So that's part of the challenge we're giving to our teachers, is to really think about how to balance instructionally the time in front of the screen with the time away from the screen. A lot of that is incorporated into breaks. Hopefully you're seeing your kids taking movement breaks, taking screen time breaks, and really being able to step away and engage in something off screen. A lot of times when I talk to families, including my own friends with school-age children, we talk about the challenge it is to balance everything at home. I worked from home today myself, and as I said, I have two young kids here at home, and it is an immense challenge to try to get done what you need to get done while supporting and being there for our kids. I think something that's really important to remember is one of the greatest things we can do is have the kids read. Reading for 90 minutes a day in total is a great goal to aim for. And when we think about that reading, it doesn't just need to be academic reading or even in a textbook or in a novel. It could be comic books. It could be joke books. It could be graphic novels. But really, if we are in a pinch or we're struggling to support our kids with the day's lesson, if we can get our kids reading and engaging in reading and talking with us about what they're learning from their reading, that is great time that's well spent in supporting our kids' development and their ongoing learning. So just to kind of quickly recap, when it comes to screen time, technology and screen time aren't necessarily good or bad in and of themselves. It's how we strike a balance and seek to use them as tools. There are effective apps, and hopefully you're seeing those come through with the instruction that you're seeing coming from your school. But not all of them are great. So we're here to help you navigate that. Scheduling regular tech breaks and making sure that the kids are engaging in something other than a device is a great way to assure that balance. And at the end of the day, when it comes right down to it, one of the greatest things we can do is engage in that reading. All right, so I'm going to kick it back to Sue.
So our fifth tip, you are already doing an excellent job at if you are attending tonight's seminar, which is to just be involved in your child's education. So one of the ideas that we're hearing is, I want to be there for my child, but I also don't want to do the work for my child. And I noticed there's a question in the chat about headphones, and I wasn't sure, Dr. Donlin, if you wanted to speak to that in terms of, if you have a 7-year-old that's wearing headphones, how do you keep track of making sure that he's engaged and at the same time not surfing the web? Where do you draw that line in terms of the being the parent and also letting him have his independence?
So yes, I can speak to that too. And just putting my dad hat on for a minute, one of the rules we have around headphones in our house is that they can be used during synchronous time. So this is time when the teacher is actively engaging with my kids through a Google Meet or a Zoom session. And that's a great time. And again, I have 2 kids in the same room learning at the same time. So when they're engaged in that synchronous time, I'm pretty confident in their engagement because the teacher is right there and they're having that interaction. When they're working asynchronously or offline with the teacher on their computer, I have them take those headphones off unless they're doing something audio. And that lets me, even from the other room, kind of keep an ear in terms of what they're working on and how that progress is going. So it's not a perfect answer, but that is one strategy that we use in our house.
Thank you so much. And I think that in combination with our next strategy is to really think about, I know I have talked with a few families who are saying to me, I'm not sure I understand everything that my child is supposed to be learning. Is the expectation that I am the teacher in addition to, making sure that they're online? And I think that if we look at our next slide, one of the things that you really want to keep in mind is just these 3 questions, making sure that you check in with your child to ask them, what are you learning? Why are you learning it? And finally, how will you know if you've learned it? These 3 simple questions, if the child knows that they're part of the routine, can help them to remain engaged because they know, mom or grandma is going to ask me, or dad is going to ask me later, what did I learn or why am I learning it? And if they keep that as part of their cognitive routine, that can really help them to remain engaged and to help your relationship between school and home not be as tense. As I'm hearing, sometimes it's a little tense to get them to focus to be on the computer. So these questions they're finding are really helping to get kids engaged and remember a little bit more so that they can help later on in a conversation. Another idea is to check in with them emotionally, asking them questions about what was your favorite part of the day? What was your least favorite part of the day? Tell me something unexpected that happened today, or tell me something funny that happened today. I've even heard some teachers and adults and parents use, tell me something that made you smile about today. And so you can think about, the mood that your child's in, but thinking about an emotional check-in as well as the check-in about what they're learning as ways to be involved in their education. Another idea is to really make sure that you have a copy of the weekly schedule that your child should be provided by their school. At Learn, we have a weekly scheduled planner that we have all of our schools using that tells you the time of instruction, when things are live, when they are recorded, what the expectations are. As we go up in grade levels, there's even links to certain activities. So if you haven't been provided with a schedule, please make sure that you reach out to your child's teacher for one. There are also other ways of getting that schedule. If for some reason a teacher doesn't have the schedule, you can also reach out to the building principal, and sometimes they also have additional copies if the teacher is busy. One of the questions we get is can you tell if your child is engaged? So the question about headphones, this also will apply to this too. You can kind of look over and see, are they making eye contact with the screen? Are they engaged in any off task behavior? For some of our students, when they're really engaged, depending on their age level, they might actually be tapping a pencil. So tapping is not necessarily an off-task behavior, but if you get a little closer, you can look for things like eye contact, or are they asking questions? Or if they're writing, are they writing something that appears to be associated with the task? And this is one of the engagement rainbows, we say, for an elementary level, of things you can look for to see how children are engaging. I noticed in the question that in the chat, there was a question of, why did teachers demand for the cameras to be on? Is there a violation of privacy or equity? I know that there are some teachers that have requested for the cameras to be on because they know that it's also easier to make relationships for the kids with one another in terms of eye contact or being able to be heard, etc. But I think that while that is something that we encourage, I think if there is ever a question in terms of your feelings of privacy in the home, I encourage you to reach out to the school to speak with them about that, because there shouldn't be a demand, especially if you have a situation that deserves privacy. So again, developing communication with your child's teacher and really thinking about how can you reach them when you do have a question is an important part of that home-school relationship. Some teachers are extremely quick with responding to Seesaw or the communication device that your school, some are using Remind, and getting back via text. Some prefer an email, and some even a phone call. Really getting to know your child's teacher and making sure that they know how to reach you and they have your current phone number and information, and that you know how to reach them, will help us all to have a higher level of success. For younger children, we encourage you to communicate with your child's teacher on a weekly basis. And for teenagers, you can also ask your child to be part of that conversation and reaching out to the teacher. Not to say that it's the child's responsibility, but as we try to move that responsibility on the child as they get a little bit older, we do encourage you to involve them in what are your goals, what are you learning, how will you know if you've learned it, and involving that in the communication with the teacher. We also would really encourage you to keep in touch about things like attendance, and if there are any issues that the school needs to be supportive, especially during this difficult time. I know it's been very helpful when parents have shared with our schools, we won't be able to get online for X reason, or my child won't be able to attend for this reason. That allows us to think of, how can we support you, or is there another avenue we can use to support you during this time? And the last thing we just wanted to remind everyone is, with the age of instant technology where you can type something into Google and get it instantly, sometimes there is also a desire to get a response from the teacher on the other side instantly. And we just wanted to give a little reminder that sometimes if a teacher doesn't get back to you immediately, especially in the hybrid situation, they could be teaching live the students that are in the classroom while you're at home needing an immediate response. So we just ask for a little bit of grace and patience in those types of situations, and know that we expect that our teachers will get back to you as soon as possible. So I see that there was a comment in the chat that there was a concern about hearing teachers yelling at their children in their own home, and that this is not okay. And, I think that there is definitely, I'm not aware of that particular situation, but I would concur with you that, we want to try to make the environment for children and learning as productive and as peaceful as possible. And if you hear a situation that's concerning, please reach out to your child's school so that we can do something to make sure that that's not interrupting your child's learning.
I'm going to share with our group another tip. And remember, focusing on those back to the basics ideas, ensuring that your child has enough sleep. We know that we feel much better daily when we're getting enough sleep. We're not feeling tired, and sleep helps our brains process information and sort through new information. It's the same thing for our children. So we want, as a recommendation, to have really good sleep routines and make sure that children are on predictable sleep patterns. Without good sleep, there are some difficulties that could happen. Lack of sleep can lead to mood disturbances, emotional instability, behavior problems, or even obesity. There's a lot of risks that are associated, that physicians have found, that are associated with lack of sleep. In this slide, this is a recommendation from I think it's the Sleep Foundation, that is recommend, and I've seen this from my daughter's pediatrician as well, recommendations of hours of sleep per day for different age groups. And for the purposes of this evening, the students that you have, the children that you have, are in that preschool to elementary age group. So you can see that a recommendation for a preschooler or early elementary school age, or even through elementary school, is about 10, 11 hours a night of sleep. That's the recommended amount. And then anything less than that may not be appropriate and may not be enough. So we'll take a minute, take a break here, and ask you, how are you doing with your sleep? Or a lot of us are managing many different roles, as from our home, as a parent, an instructor, a supporter of their child's education. Take a minute. How are you doing with your sleep? You can put that in the chat for us. We have someone that's saying that 7 to 8 hours every night and going to bed at 8 p.m. I'm not sure if the 8 p.m. is their child's bedtime, but I totally understand. My daughter has an 8 p.m. hard bedtime each evening. 3 to 4 hours a night does not seem like enough. I'm so sorry to hear that, Jim. Sounds like you're doing a lot of hard work with balancing, supporting your children and working in the evening. Someone waking up at 4 a.m. to support their child. We definitely want to recognize everyone who's putting in such hard and time consuming. There's only so many hours of the day, but please, our recommendations to our family members too is take some time for yourself too, please. We want everyone to be getting good sleep, getting good rest, taking care of themselves. And then we have, this is a great little recommendation here. We have a time change coming up this weekend, and that if you're getting off track with sleep, a recommendation is to set a plan, a 10-day plan to readjust that sleep. So you'll see in this model here, it looks like the bedtime was 9:48, which is probably too late for our elementary age students to be going to bed. And but it happens. Sometimes there's fun things that happen. It happens in my house. Fun things are happening, and we stay up a little later than we probably should. But then to adjust that sleep, then think of a 10-day schedule of how to reduce that, or move the bedtime a little bit earlier every day, so that way your child readjusts. And that ultimate goal, you'll see there highlighted in green, is at day 10, we're back to that 8 p.m. bedtime. So to support you, one of the things that really helps with getting enough sleep is having an established bedtime routine and sticking to it. So if it's reading a book, brushing teeth, doing quiet activities to kind of settle down and get ready for bedtime each evening, and sticking to that is a really helpful strategy. And we all know avoiding those electronics in the evening, that blue light that comes from like cell phones or tablets really does get your brain reactivated, and it can be difficult to go back to sleep or fall asleep after being on a cell phone or iPad before bed. So limiting that time, definitely an hour before bedtime, turning those items off. And turn this over to Pam.
I think you're on mute, Pam.
I am, sorry. Thanks, Carla. We're running a little short on time, so I'm just kind of speed through. Lastly, as we sort of explained at the beginning, just like teachers have expectations in school, they may have expectations for your child online. And as we discussed a little bit before, some of these, we need your help as parents at home to help your child learn these expectations and stick to them. So this is one example of something that you can print, and this is available in our resources that we'll share with you later, but helping your child visualize what it looks like to be engaged in at home. You can help your child by encouraging them to stay in one spot so that they're not running around the house, or limiting the noisy tasks that you have to do during the day when the child isn't on a live session. And we also want to recognize too that these live sessions are class time, and that does include the chat feature. So if your child is telling you something that's happening during class, please reach out to the teacher. And I'm just going to go back to that comment that was in the Q&A about the teacher maybe addressing behavior that's at home. I would encourage you to reach out to the child's teacher or the school's principal just to share your concerns and perhaps help work with the teacher about maybe why the teacher might be addressing that behavior, and just help have a conversation. It may be that whatever's happening might be distracting to the class or the teacher, but in that case, we absolutely can work with the teacher about helping the student turn their camera off when they need to move a route for whatever reason or something's happening at home. But I always encourage you, all of our teachers and our principals want to hear from you and work with you to make this as successful as possible. If it's something that your child is telling you that is dangerous, please interrupt the class session. Otherwise, just please let the teacher know or the principal know after the session. But having said that, depending on the age of the child, children may deserve some privacy in their learning. I know that students have expressed fear or reluctance to engage if they think their parent can hear, because they don't want the parent to hear that they're struggling to learn, or they're trying, or they might get a question wrong. So just be nearby, but try not to hover if at all possible, so that your child has some freedom in their learning. And just to recap, try to know what the teacher expects and help support them. Help your child know the schedule. I love that comment from before about setting alarms. If your child expresses anxiety about being on camera, help them learn how to turn the camera off and on, but also help them learn how to turn their self view off and on. Sometimes kiddos just don't want to see themselves. I know it can be anxiety making to see myself at an odd angle and without a filter. And help the child be self-reflective, in your conversations with them about how they were feeling during that session. So just to end today, we just would like to hear from you. What's one strategy that you're going to try with your child that you learned from today? Kathy, love the idea about headphones. Absolutely. Ashley, transitioning back to appropriate bedtime. That's actually on my list of to-dos this week and over the next 10 days. Once the time changes, just help myself get back into going to bed at a reasonable time. Kim, love the idea about adding more reading in, for sure. Reading is definitely taking the hardest hit, I think, in virtual learning, that kids aren't reading as much as they used to. So if you can reach out to, if you need texts or books, please reach out to your child's school. I know that a lot of them are doing book pickup. So if you need something for your child to read in hand, please let your teacher know.
And I heard there were a couple of questions too that I'm hoping that we can answer for parents. One of them was if there is a goal for more small group to one-to-one check-ins with teachers in the virtual space.
So I can jump in on that too. I think that's always a goal. I think some of the feedback we heard loud and clear is that connection is one of the most important goals that we can have right now, especially for our kiddos who are learning primarily or solely through online learning. I think part of the hybrid model has presented opportunity for smaller class size and stronger connection in an in-person setting. What we need to continue to think about is how do we use our Wednesdays, how do we use our other time for connecting with our students online in a more personalized way. So I think that's great feedback, and so much of what our families have shared tonight is really important for us to hear in terms of feedback, so that we can continue to evolve and meet our needs. So thank you for that.
And just to piggyback on that, there was also a question about a shift to why we had more synchronous than asynchronous. That was a request from some of the family feedback to have more of the synchronous learning. But please, as we try to gather input from families, if you're feeling like you need more extension or more asynchronous activities, please make sure that you share that with your child's teacher. And in the meantime, we're going to continue to collect feedback as well to see how we can better our instruction on our end and make sure that kids are getting what they need.
So lastly, we have lots of resources, including the videos and information from today available on our website. If you have a chance to take a picture of this with your phone, I will also be sending this out to you in an email tomorrow. So watch your email for that. Just with lots of things and resources we've shared with you. But before you leave, we are asking if you could just take our poll. I'm going to send that out to you right now. It's just a 2 quick questions, just so we can help get our family universities, make them more effective and more beneficial for our families.
Pam, while folks are doing that, can you talk a little bit about how they can reach out to you for some support too? Because you're a great resource for so many families. I want to make sure they know how to get in touch with you.
Sure, absolutely. So I am, when you get an email from me, you'll now have my email. I work via email. We can talk via email, or you can set up a time to meet with me via Zoom or on the phone where I can help you troubleshoot or work with your, work with your child or work with you to make sure you know how to use the tools and devices and apps that are being used. So I'm happy to reach out or happy to work with all of our families.
Thank you. And I think all the panelists as well, and hopefully we can include our contact information with Pam's email. But if there's anything we can do, if there's a question we didn't answer tonight or something you'd rather talk about offline or give us some feedback, that communication is really important to us. And hopefully you see if you were with us last year to this year, you see us responding to that feedback. That's something that's really important that we want to do, is not only hear folks, but also put it into action and practice. So we welcome that feedback and we appreciate that partnership.
And thank you to all of our translators, including those of you who are parents at our Learn schools, for being here and translating this evening. We really appreciate that assistance with our families.
I also want to recognize Beth Renee. She's our English learner systems developer who did a lot of work and reached out to her contacts to bring our wonderful translators together tonight. So thank you so much for your engagement tonight and for your feedback. And you'll be hearing from us soon with some resources, with our contact information and our thanks. So we're going to actually end this session now, and panelists, I'm going to have you click on over to our 6 p.m. session so that we can meet with our grades 6 through 12 parents. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.